Okay guys, we're going to talk about why we're throwing this ball into the ground when we switch up to our offhand, and especially when we're shooting the ball on the run at game speed. The reason we're throwing the ball into the ground with our offhand is because the dominant hand that's guiding the ball that's on the actual throw, it's almost like throwing a baseball or football, is going to be your top hand. So your bottom hand does a little bit of pulling, and then your top hand does the pushing, but it's also the one that's doing all the aiming and really controlling where the ball is going is your top hand. So the throw and the shot is a combination of pushing the ball with the top hand and pulling with the bottom. Well, what happens when that ball goes into the ground, it's when our dominant hand, which in my case, or most people's case, is going to be your right hand, is on the bottom of the stick, and you're doing more with that bottom hand, which is the pulling, than you are pushing with the top hand and guiding that ball with the top hand. So the way that we work on that is just a simple drill where you're going to be drilling just one-handed on the stick, because that's when you're passing and catching and shooting one-handed. That's what gets you into forcing your offhand to playing that dominant role on the stick, where it's doing all the work, as opposed to your offhand pulling on the stick, which is going to be natural for you. And you'll feel this clear distinction when you drill this way, one-handed, and then you put your strong hand on the bottom of the stick. If you're concentrating on still forcing your offhand to do most of the work and the aiming, then you're going to feel that different shift from your dominating hand doing more of the work and just pulling and yanking this thing and driving the ball into the ground. Or another thing that happens, if you're doing an elevator, you're shooting from low to high, you'll launch that thing over the goal a lot of times on your offhand, and your bottom hand's doing all the work because it's pulling back too much. And it's not the whip in your stick, it's your just bottom hand is just whipping that thing back too hard, instead of your offhand playing that dominant role on the top of the stick. So the way we do this drill, very simply, is you get out there against the wall or with somebody you can throw and catch with. Start out with just passing and catching until you get warmed up. Once you get warmed up, drop your good hand off the stick, choke up a little bit so you have more control over the stick, and then you're just throwing and catching with your offhand. Then mix it up a little bit. Go sidearm, go low to high, roll the ball down low, and kind of change the way your fingers are holding the stick. Of course, you're holding the stick with your fingers, not your palms. You're never gripping it, right? So it's always light on our fingers. We're going up here, we're coming down here. It forces you to kind of change that grip a little bit, going sidearm. And then once you get really comfortable with that, you can start quick sticking it with your offhand, and then even getting a little bit lower on that shaft. This is a little bit more advanced. So once you kind of get the handle of it and you have the wrist strength, then bring your hand further and further down that shaft, and you just get that much better at it. So then after you've done your warm-up with two hands, and then you switched it up and did a lot of one-hand drilling and throwing and catching or shooting, then bring it all together, bring your strong hand back to the bottom, but still keep in mind you're putting all your emphasis on that top hand doing the throwing and the shooting. That's what's doing all the work. When you get that down and you're still applying the fundamentals of having that opposite shoulder facing forward, you're stepping forward with the opposite foot, and then you're coming over from the ear. It's almost like throwing a baseball or a football, same thing, right? You'll feel that offhand clearly, and you'll feel this as soon as the drill is over and you put that bottom hand back on that stick again. You're gonna feel your top hand doing that work, and you're gonna be a lot more consistent and accurate with that top hand, whether you're throwing or you're shooting. So that's how you do that. And by the way, if you don't have the wrist strength, the whole point is to get your offhand playing that dominant role on a throw or a shot. So if you don't have the wrist strength to do this consistently, then just pick up a fiddle stick and then work with the fiddle stick against the wall, or play catch with somebody like that. So that's the fastest way to improve your offhand. And if you do just this one time, one drill, once you put that bottom hand on there, again, you're gonna see that you're gonna have a lot more consistency with it, and you'll feel that distinction when you're out there. But anytime you play with your top hand with your offhand until you get comfortable with it, just keep in mind that, hey, if you're throwing that thing into the ground or it's off a little bit, it's because your dominant hand is still trying to do too much on that stick and pull back too much, as opposed to that offhand doing all the work on the aiming and the guiding of that ball.